The thunder of hooves had faded. The clash of steel was gone. Smoke hung heavy, choking the morning sun, rising from broken homes and shattered lives. But amid the ruin and ruin alone, her nightmare was just beginning. She was no warrior, no hero of battle. Her voice was unheard in the halls of power. Yet after the armies marched away, she became the battlefield itself, not by sword or shield, but by the brutal cost of conquest. This is the story history whispers, but never shouts. The hidden war, the war waged in silence, the war on women, the cruel, unspoken aftermath of medieval victory. Setting the stage, war wasn't over when the fighting stopped. In medieval Europe, war was a constant. Kings fought over land, over religion, over pride. But when the bloodshed on the battlefield ended, a quieter kind of suffering began. It happened in the homes, in barns, in the shattered ruins of conquered towns. The victors celebrated. They raised their banners and sang their songs. But the women of the fallen town, they knew what came. Next, whether young or old, noble or common, it made no difference. They weren't seen as people. They were seen as spoils, just like the gold, the grain. The horses, they were treated as property. And this wasn't just the behavior of barbarians or uncivilized tribes. It was common, even among the most Christian armies. The English did it, so did the French. Even the Crusaders, those who marched under the name of God, did it without hesitation. The sacking of Béziers, 1209. Let's begin in France, the year 1209. The town of Béziers stood in the path of the Albigensian Crusade, a holy war. This war had been ordered by the Pope himself. When the Crusaders reached Béziers, they gave the people a choice: hand over the heretics or face annihilation. The town refused, so the army attacked. Thousands were slaughtered, men, women, even children. But for many women, the nightmare didn't end in death. They were captured alive. One of the Crusader leaders reportedly said, "Kill them or God will know his own." So they did, but not before subjecting the women to horrors. There are accounts of women being dragged through the streets, humiliated, violated. Some were tied to trees. Soldiers took turns, and afterward, they were killed. The chroniclers of that time didn't hide this. They wrote it down as if it were expected, a natural part of victory. The legal silence, no laws, no justice. There were no laws to protect these women. In most medieval codes, wartime rape wasn't even listed as a crime. It was just collateral. The conquerors believed they had the right to do as they pleased. Yes, some kings issued vague warnings. "Don't harm the innocent," they said. But those words were rarely enforced. To the average soldier, a woman in a defeated town was a reward. If she resisted, she was beaten, or worse. The norm of forced marriage. Sometimes a soldier would marry the woman he had taken, but it wasn't marriage in any true sense. It was ownership, painted over with the brush of religion. A German knight might take a Slavic girl from a burned village and call her his bride. A Muslim warlord might capture a Christian woman and claim her as a concubine. Often the women were renamed, forced to convert, expected to bear children for the man who had taken everything from them. In truth, they were prisoners, living inside someone else's house, someone else's world. The Woman of Limoges, 1370. Now let's travel to the year 1370. The 100 Years' War was raging. The English army, led by Edward the Black Prince, attacked the city of Limoges in France. The city fell quickly, and the women were not spared. A chronicler named Jean Froissart recorded the events. He wrote, "No pity was shown. Homes were burned. People who tried to escape were hunted down. Many women were violated, some in front of their families. Others were forced to watch their children die before being taken." One name from that day survived: Isabel. She was engaged to a young baker. During the attack, her fiancé was killed right in front of her. She was dragged from her home and handed over to 3 English soldiers. They kept her in their tent for 5 days. Afterwards, they threw her into the snow, half naked, bleeding, barely alive. A group of nuns found her. She never spoke again. Her story lived on, only in the letters the nuns sent to a bishop, the war they carried forever. These women bore wounds. No sword could leave. Their bodies might have healed, but their minds, their spirits, were shattered. In a world where purity and obedience were everything for women, to be a captive meant lifelong shame. Some families rejected them. Some were forced into convents, not by choice, but to hide their disgrace. Others took their own lives. Today we'd call this post-traumatic stress. But back then there were no words, just silence, just pain. The widow of Kraków, 1241. Now we go east to Kraków, Poland. The year is 1241. Mongol forces invaded. The men tried to defend the city, but they were overwhelmed. As the Mongols approached, women ran into churches, hoping for sanctuary, but mercy never came. The invaders tore the doors from their hinges. Among the women was Katarzyna, a widow. Her husband had died of illness just months earlier. She was hiding with her sister and 3 nieces. The soldiers found them, dragged them into the street, and began to auction them off right there in front of the townspeople. Katarzyna was sold for a handful of coins and a saddle. She was taken by a Mongol commander and never seen again. Her nieces vanished. No records, no graves. Just memories lost to time. The war history doesn't tell. When we read about medieval wars, we hear about swords, armor, strategy, victory, but we rarely hear what happened afterward, in the ashes, in the silence, when the songs of triumph ended and the cries of the forgotten began. This was the true cost of war for women. No statues, no honor, only pain, shame, silence, and generations of scars that never made it into the history books. The horrors of war did not end with the clang of swords. For many women, their suffering was just beginning. The stories of their pain are whispered through history, rarely told, often ignored. But these stories matter because they reveal the hidden truth behind medieval conquest. The Siege of Constantinople, 1204. Let's travel to the great city of Constantinople in 1204. This was during the Fourth Crusade, when Western European armies turned against the Christian city they were supposed to protect. After weeks of siege, the walls finally fell. The city was plundered. Priceless treasures were stolen. And the people? They were slaughtered, enslaved, or worse. Women were among the most vulnerable. Many were dragged from their homes, taken into the streets. Some were sold in slave markets. Others were forced into sexual slavery. Chroniclers describe women screaming as soldiers broke down their doors, mothers clinging to their children. The invaders showed little mercy. For these women, the city's fall was the end of safety and the beginning of a nightmare. The fate of captive women, slavery, and silence. Women captured in war often became slaves. Slavery in medieval times was brutal and dehumanizing, but for women, it was also deeply isolating. Many were separated from their families, thrown into unknown places where no one spoke their language. Their identities were erased. They were forced to serve in households, or worse, in brothels. Some were given new names, forced to convert to new religions. Their past lives were erased like a forgotten dream. Many lived in constant fear of violence, yet the world outside turned a blind eye. No laws protected them. No one spoke their names. The tale of Margaret, the captive of Acre, 1291. In 1291, the city of Acre, the last stronghold of the Crusaders in the Holy Land, fell to the Muslim Mamluks. The fall marked the end of the Crusader presence in the region. Among the captives was a woman named Margaret. She was the wife of a knight who fought bravely, but died in the battle. Margaret was captured along with other women and children. She was taken to Cairo, far from her home. There, she was sold to a wealthy merchant as a servant. Her story was recorded in letters found centuries later. She wrote about her grief, her longing for home, and the terrible loneliness she felt. For years, she lived as a prisoner in a strange land. Her story reminds us that the fate of war was not only death, but also endless captivity. The role of religion, blessing atrocities. Religion often justified these horrors. Many soldiers believed they were carrying out God's will. Preachers blessed their swords and called their enemies heretics or infidels. This gave license to commit terrible acts without guilt. The violence was seen as a form of divine punishment. Women, often accused of witchcraft or heresy, became targets. Religious zeal masked cruelty, and the cries of women were drowned out by prayers and chants. The social impact. Women left to rebuild. After the battles, many women were left behind, widows, orphans, and survivors. They had to rebuild their shattered lives alone. Villages were destroyed. Farms burned, men were dead or missing. Women took on new roles, farmers, merchants, heads of households, but they carried scars, visible and invisible. Their communities mourned in silence. The trauma of conquest haunted generations. The story of Eleanor of Aquitaine's court. Not all women were captives or victims. Some, like Eleanor of Aquitaine, wielded power in their own right. Eleanor was Queen of France, then England. She ruled vast lands and influenced kings, yet even she knew the dangers women faced during wartime. Her court sheltered refugees and survivors. She wrote letters pleading for mercy for women affected by war. Her story is a rare light amid the darkness. It shows the strength and resilience women could hold, despite the horrors around them. Psychological shadows. A life forever changed. War's impact on women went beyond the physical. Many suffered lifelong emotional wounds, depression, fear, and trauma were common. Some turned to faith for comfort, others withdrew from society. Families fractured under the weight of shame and grief. Children born of violence were often hidden or abandoned. The silence around these experiences made healing nearly impossible. The legacy of silence. For centuries, history chose to forget these women. Their voices were lost in the pages written by men, kings, generals, priests, but their stories live on in letters, chronicles, and whispered legends. They remind us that war is never clean or noble, that the price of conquest is paid in blood and tears, and that the true battlefield often lies within the hearts of those who survive. Why these stories matter today, and the true cost of war. So why do these dark stories still matter today? Because history is never complete without them. To truly understand the past, we must face the full cost of war, not just the battles and kings, but the silent suffering behind the scenes. The violence against women during medieval conquests wasn't a tragic accident. It was a deliberate tool of power, a weapon used to break communities and control lands. By remembering these women, we honor their pain and their courage. We challenge the silence that has hidden their voices for far too long. Medieval battles are often remembered for knights, swords, and heroic clashes, but the true cost of war was often carried quietly, behind closed doors. Women lived through horrors that changed the course of their lives forever. Their suffering shaped families, communities, and the very fabric of history. As we look back, we must see them, not as forgotten casualties, but as real people who endured the nightmare that followed every conquest. Their stories demand to be heard,